Recently, I made individual tutorials on aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, which is also known as the exposure triangle. And when you're out shooting in a bunch of different environments and lighting situations, you're gonna need to adjust all of these settings as you go. So today I'm gonna show you some photo and video examples, all with different scenarios and creative intentions. That way you can get a better idea of what you might want to set your camera out to when you're out shooting. Now, if you're unfamiliar with aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, I definitely recommend checking out my individual tutorials first, but here's a quick summary. Aperture is how open or closed the blades of your lens are, and shooting at a wide aperture will make your image brighter and give you a shallow depth of field. Closed down apertures will darken your image and give you a deeper depth of field. Shutter speed is the speed at which your camera shutter closes for each frame. Slow shutter creates more motion blur and a brighter image. Fast shutter creates less motion blur and a darker image. ISO is your camera sensor's sensitivity to light. A lower ISO will be darker and have less noise in the shadows and highlights. A higher ISO will be brighter, but introduce more noise to your image. First, let's break down some photo examples. Okay, so this first photo, I was shooting in some bright afternoon daylight, and my ISO was 320, and my shutter speed was 1/4000th of a second, which is really high to make my image a little darker to compensate for that bright light that was hitting the flowers. My aperture I shot at an f2.8, which is creating a shallow depth of field, so a nice blurry background, and that way it kind of helps you just focus on the subject. It really isolates it from the frame. So in this case, I would say the most important setting for this photo and how I wanted it to turn out was really the aperture. All right, so this next photo was shot on film, and it's of my fiance at Disneyland. And what I really wanted to do with this photo is actually kind of the opposite of that last flower example. Instead of having one subject in focus with like a super blurry background, I want you to see where your subject is at. So my aperture that I shot at was actually between an f16 and an f22. Because if I shot at like an f2.8 or a wider aperture, my background would just be kind of blurred out, and then you see the subject, but you don't really know the context of where they're at. And I don't have the exact number because I shot on film and there's no digital camera information for that, but I do have a rough idea. So my film stock that I used was Lomo 800, which is basically ISO 800, but I purposely overexposed as if I was shooting at ISO 400, because typically with film, you can overexpose your image a little bit and get cleaner detail in your shadows. And then because I shot at such a closed down aperture, I had to shoot at a slightly lower shutter speed between 1/125th and 1/250th of a second. All right, so the next video example is a set of running scenes that I did with one of my friends. Huge thank you to Ryan Bausch for being the runner in these scenes. So I was shooting on a Sony FX3, so I set my ISO to 800, which is the native ISO when you're shooting in S-Log3. This gives me the best possible dynamic range performance out of the camera, which I really needed because as you can tell, I'm shooting him backlit again. So there's a lot of harsh shadows and there's a really bright skyline. So I need as much dynamic range as I can get. My aperture was set to f6.3 because for this scene, I kind of want you to see the background and be kind of immersed into the frame. So I just thought that was kind of cool, especially because you can see the mountains in the background. And my shutter speed is set to 1/48th of a second. So the general rule is to keep your shutter speed 2 times your frame rate. So I was shooting 24 frames per second. So I set my shutter speed 1/48th of a second. And now as you can see, I have this really pleasing motion blur that just looks cinematic. And again, it looks very natural. So at ISO 800 with a f6.3 and 1/48th of a second, my image would look overexposed at this time of day. And I got my Freewell 2 to 5 stop variable in D filter, attached it, and now this is like sunglasses for your lens, and I can adjust the strength until my image is properly exposed, which I'll be sure to link that in the description below. Alright everyone, so hopefully those photo and video examples helped you better understand the exposure triangle. The main takeaway with this is to understand your creative intentions. So anyways, that is it for this video. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.